North Korea has a founding myth. Kim Il-sung, the guerrilla warrior, the father of the nation, the man who built a country from nothing. That's the official story. Here's what the documents show. North Korea was built by Soviet military officers, men who wrote its laws, designed its army, staged its elections, and selected its leader. Men whose names were never meant to surface. Today, we're looking at who they were and what they actually did. To understand what these Soviet officers built, you have to understand what they walked into. August 1945. Japan has just surrendered. The Korean peninsula, occupied, exploited, and colonized by Japan for 35 years, is suddenly free. There's no government, no police force, no functioning bureaucracy, no army. A population that has spent a generation under colonial rule now finds two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, each planting a flag on opposite ends of the peninsula. The dividing line was the 38th parallel. It was drawn in a single late-night meeting by two American colonels, Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel, on August 10, 1945. One day after Soviet forces entered Korea. There was no careful planning behind it. Two officers drew a line, and a nation was cut in half. The North, the industrial half, the mountainous half, the half with the power stations and the mineral deposits, went to the Soviets. They entered it with the 25th Army under Colonel General Ivan Chistyakov. Ivan Mikhailovich Chistyakov was the commanding officer of the Soviet 25th Army. Korea, to Chistyakov, was an administrative matter. Shortly after arriving in the north, he received a question from his commanding officer, Marshal Kirill Meretskov. Where should the 25th Army put its headquarters? Pyongyang or Hamhung? Chistyakov chose Pyongyang. That single decision is why Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea today. There was no geopolitical calculation behind it. A general picked a city for logistical convenience, and a country was built around that choice. Chistyakov's most visible act came on October 14, 1945, at the Pyongyang Municipal Stadium. He stood before a crowd of Koreans and introduced a man he described as a national hero and famous partisan leader. That was the moment Kim Il-sung was presented to the Korean people. After that rally, Chistyakov stepped back. He was a soldier, not a political operator. The work of building a state fell to someone else. His name was Terentii Fomich Shtikov. Shtikov was a colonel general and political commissar who had survived Stalin's purges of the late 1930s. He was a protege of Andrei Zhdanov, one of the most powerful men in the Soviet Communist Party, and he had direct access to Stalin himself. When the 25th Army moved into northern Korea in the autumn of 1945, Shtikov moved with it. While Chistyakov commanded the army, Shtikov ran everything else. By late 1945, he had established what was called the Soviet Civil Administration, a governing body composed entirely of Soviet military officers. Despite the name, there was nothing civil about it. It was a military administration running a country it had inherited by partition. Historian Andrei Lankov, the leading Western authority on North Korea's founding period, drawing on declassified Soviet archives, described Shtikov as the real supreme ruler of North Korea, the principal supervisor of both the Soviet military and the local authorities. Lankov identified him as the actual architect of the North Korean state as it emerged in 1945 to 1950. The man credited in every official North Korean history with building the country, Kim Il-sung, was not, according to the declassified record, the man making the decisions. Shtaikov was. His diary, recovered after the Soviet collapse, is now considered one of the most valuable primary sources in Korean studies. His own subordinate, who ran the day-to-day administration, later said there was not an event in North Korea in which Shtaikov was not involved. Building a country means laws, elections, a military, a police force, a constitution, and an economy. Between 1945 and 1948, Soviet officers under Shtykov's direction built all of it. The land reform of March 1946, which redistributed land from Japanese-aligned landlords to poor farmers and became the new government's first genuine popular policy, was drafted by Soviet advisors. At the time, roughly 58% of all arable land in the north was owned by just 4% of the population. The reform was politically effective and widely supported. Kim Il-sung signed it. Shtaikov designed it. The elections followed the same pattern. In December 1946, Shtaikov and two other Soviet generals determined the composition of the North Korean Legislative Assembly, the number of seats per party, the vote percentage each faction would receive, the number of women to be included. No Koreans were in the room. The results were set before a ballot was cast. The Soviet Politburo in Moscow reviewed and approved the North Korean parliament's agenda on a regular basis. When a military parade was planned for February 1948 to mark the founding of the Korean People's Army, the Politburo formally authorized it. And then there is the Constitution. In 1948, a draft constitution was sent from Pyongyang to Moscow. Soviet specialists assessed it and found it wanting. The document moved up the chain to Stalin. Stalin personally edited it. According to Andrei Lankov, corroborated by Soviet archival records, Stalin spent nearly a full working session on the draft, rewriting specific articles that were incorporated into the final version. The 1948 Constitution of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, 10 chapters, 104 articles, was edited in the Kremlin. The Soviet military police also arrested all major political opponents of the emerging regime. No North Korean security apparatus yet existed to do it. Those opponents were sent to prison camps in Siberia. Shtyikov had built the state. But a state still needs a face. That job belonged to someone else. A Soviet lieutenant colonel named Grigory Mekler, a linguist, a propaganda specialist, and by his own account, the officer who first put Kim Il-sung's name forward for the job. In April 1945, before the war with Japan had ended, Soviet headquarters at the settlement of Viatskoye sent a request through the chain of command. Identify a candidate to lead a potential new Korean state. Mekler, head of the 7th Department of Special Propaganda for the Far Eastern Front, conducted the interviews. He reviewed the candidates. He recommended Kim. He later learned his recommendation had been decisive in the Soviet decision to move forward with Kim. When Kim arrived in Korea, Mekler stayed with him for a full year to manage his public standing. Kim's Korean was limited. He had spent years in the Soviet Union, and his formal education, 8 years of it, had been conducted in Chinese. When Soviet officers prepared a speech for him to deliver at a Communist Party Congress 3 days after his arrival in Korea, he needed significant coaching to deliver it. Mekler helped write his speeches and organized public tours. When South Korean radio began broadcasting that Kim Il-sung was not ethnically Korean, threatening his appeal in a country that had spent decades under foreign occupation, Meckler organized a walking tour of Kim's native village, Mangyongdae, a few kilometers from Pyongyang. Radio announcements invited people to join. Crowds followed Kim through the streets. Sometimes after his speeches at demonstrations, there was silence, Meckler recalled in interviews given after the Soviet collapse. But later people started clapping. Before Meckler left Korea in 1946, transferred to Siberia, Kim asked for a final word of advice. Meckler gave him an English phrase, "Look before you leap." "We never were friends," Meckler said of Kim. "I had to maintain subordination." Contact between them ended in 1946. By the time Meckler gave those interviews, the man he had spent a year shaping had ruled North Korea for decades. Because Kim Il-sung was not a passive participant in his own installation. Once the state was functional, the army armed, the institutions running, the mythology in place, he moved against the network that had built him. The Soviet Koreans, ethnic Koreans from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan who had served as translators, administrators, military commanders, and government officials in the new state, were purged first. It happened gradually through the late 1950s and into the early 1960s. The official charges were ideological weakness, divided loyalties, factionalism. They had knowledge of how the state had actually been built and who had built it. The ideology Kim used to carry out the purges was Jusha, self-reliance. The doctrine held that North Korea owed nothing to foreign powers, had constructed itself through its own revolutionary energy, and needed no outside support. Jusha's own original architect, Hwang Jang-yop, later defected and described it plainly. It was a political instrument designed to remove rivals, cut foreign influence from domestic affairs, and justify hereditary succession. Shtaikov was removed in December 1950, fired as ambassador and demoted after the Korean War's early military failures. He died in Leningrad in 1964 at 57. The land reform he designed, the elections he controlled, the constitution he edited alongside Stalin, all of it recorded in official North Korean history as Kim Il-sung's work. Chistyakov retired. Meckler moved to the Institute of Oriental Studies in Moscow, where he worked as a researcher. He was in his 90s when he gave his most detailed interviews. He died in 2005 at 96. By the early 1960s, Kim had expelled the last Soviet advisors, purged rivals across every political faction, and elevated his own family, parents, uncles, grandparents, a great-grandparent, to the status of revolutionary heroes. The builders were gone. There's a word for what happened in Northern Korea between 1945 and 1948. Manufacturing. A state was manufactured. A leader was manufactured. A national mythology was manufactured. The men who did it, Soviet officers working under orders from Moscow, accountable to Stalin, answerable to no Korean, did the work thoroughly enough that 60 years of state propaganda has come close to burying the record. Close. Because the record survived. Shtaikov's diary, the Politburo approvals, the archival correspondence, the interviews Meckler gave in his final years, the Soviet documents that historians like Andrei Lankov and Catherine Weathersby spent years locating and translating. These are not speculative sources. They are the documentary record. That record shows Stalin editing a constitution in the Kremlin, Shtaikov authoring the land reform, election results determined in a room with no Korean present, a Soviet propaganda officer spending a year manufacturing a future dictator's public image. North Korea is still governed by Kim's family. The mythology remains intact for those inside it. The officers who built the country remain absent from the official account, but they were there. General Chistyakov chose the city. General Shtikov wrote the laws. Colonel Meckler built the image. Working under orders from Moscow, they constructed one of the most enduring authoritarian systems of the 20th century. They were never supposed to be remembered. Now you know their names. That record leads here. North Korea in 2025. 3 generations of the same family still in power. 26 million people living inside a mythology so sealed, so total, that most of them have no way of knowing their country was designed by foreign military officers in a language their founding leader could barely speak. The cult of personality Grigory Meckler spent a year constructing in 1945 outlasted the Soviet Union. The army Soviet advisors trained and equipped now has nuclear weapons. The constitution Stalin edited in a Kremlin night in 1948 has been revised, but the state it produced is still standing. Shtikov is buried in St. Petersburg. Chistyakov is buried in Moscow. Meckler died at 96 in a Moscow apartment, a man whose most consequential year of work never appeared in any official record. In Pyongyang, the statues of Kim Il-sung still face the horizon. That's what a manufactured state looks like when it works. It doesn't need the people who built it anymore. It becomes self-sustaining. It outlives the builders. It outlives the truth. The Soviet officers who built North Korea are gone. Their work is not.